Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, the left is in full smear mode. Both left-wing elected officials as well as their handmaidens in the D.C. press corps. Of course, the D.C. press corps, that's a reference to the BuzzFeed unverified story about this 35-page dossier, a summary of which was allegedly presented to Donald Trump when he was briefed by intelligence officials on Friday, which suggests that there is compromising information that the Russians have on Donald Trump with respect to personal conduct, with respect to aides communicating with the Russians that
And his
could
finances.
that could hang over his head as president, that could allow the Russians to blackmail President Trump. Totally unverified, rejected by Trump. Michael Cohen, one of his attorneys, who is alleged to have gone to Prague to visit some Russian operative, said, "I've never been to Prague in my life," in response to this unverified, unethical story in BuzzFeed that's been picked up by CNN and is being discussed on all the channels.
I think CNN had it first because they're triumphing their accomplishments this morning, saying
cares?
Jim Sciutto, the reporter who broke the story, and saying that basically that Trump surrogates were in contact with Russian operatives during the campaign.
Right. CNN saying to BuzzFeed, "We were unethical before you were unethical." Boy, what a competition.
They haven't walked back the story yet.
Well, of course not. It's a smear campaign. That's the point of smear campaign. You don't walk it back. That's the purpose is what they're doing. You also have this story in Politico. The headline, I love that. Ex-wife of Labor nominee leveled abuse claims on Oprah. This is with respect to Andrew Puzder, who is Trump's nominee for labor secretary. He's the CEO of fast food chains.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Those racy commercials.
Yeah. Puzder's ex-wife accused him of, quote, having assaulted and battered her by striking her violently about the face, chest, back, shoulders, and neck without provocation or cause. She suffered severe permanent injuries. This goes back to a 1988 petition obtained by Politico from the Circuit Court of St. Louis County. And then you go 10 paragraphs down, and you find that Puzder and Fierstein claim amicable relations today. Fierstein says they have even shared Thanksgiving dinner.
That's a big deal.
This is the big deal. In an email to Puzder last November, disclosed by him, his ex-wife wrote, quote, "You know how deeply I regret many of the rash decisions I made at the time, and I sincerely hope that none of those decisions will become an issue for you. You were not abusive." Okay, but that's belied by the headline. You got to go 16 graphs down to read the comeuppance, if you will, to be fair. This is so unfair that going back to the BuzzFeed CNN story, even left-wing crank David Corn over at Mother Jones wouldn't publish the dossier saying even Donald Trump deserves some journalistic fairness. And then Cory Booker, he has fantastical stories about fictional drug dealers in Newark, New Jersey, testifies before Jeff Sessions today to continue the left's theme of Jeff Sessions as a racist, which was battered around yesterday in the day one of the confirmation hearings. So for more on this and what comes next on the personnel, because personnel is policy, we're happy to be joined by Steve Moore. He's the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, guys. Good morning. I just listened to your soliloquy, and, the words of the great Rodney King came to mind. Can't we all just get along?
Well, that's clearly not. No, clearly we cannot. What about that? Do you see any trouble ahead? In your particular area of focus for any of Trump's cabinet nominees who are in the space of economic policy?
I think that the charges against and the allegations against Senator Sessions are ridiculous. Anyone who knows the man, and I've been around Senator Sessions for 20 years, and it's one of the most honorable men I've met in politics. And the fact that he's a white man from Alabama makes him a racist, right? Those allegations are ridiculous. Andy Puzder, I've known for many years. He's an amazing businessman. He saved thousands of jobs. Of course, you don't see that in any of these allegations against the guy. He is a job creator. He is a great businessman, and how should that be disqualifying? And when you were reading that little text about these allegations in the divorce settlement, I was thinking, my God, thank God no one, I didn't get a cabinet appointment and somebody opened up my divorce document because, I think people who've gone through divorces know this, that, spouses will say, terrible things about their ex-spouse in a
It's
divorce
ugly.
settlement. I mean, that just happens. That is standard there. I have a great relationship with my ex-wife, but, some of the things that she said about me and I said about her in the divorce settlement, I would never want to have that so public. So, these are just, BS charges, and I think the left is it's character assassination. The only one who I think is in, who the left is going to make a really aggressive play at and might succeed, although I doubt it, is the EPA director. And I think that Pruitt is a great man. He's fantastic for the job, but I only mean this in the sense that the left has their fangs out for him, especially because he's a free market guy, and he doesn't kowtow to the Greens, and they're going to go very aggressively after him and say, oh, he's a climate change denier and all of these things, and we'll see whether that causes him any trouble.
What about something that I think was grossly missed yesterday was the Homeland Security General John Kelly, because he would back down on waterboarding, he backed down on targeting Muslims with surveillance, and he isn't giving full support now of the wall.
Well, I have to confess I didn't watch that hearing. I just watched a few minutes of it when it was on Fox News, so I don't really have much to say about that. I don't know the man. I'm not a foreign policy expert, so I can't really comment on that.
Yesterday, Jeff Flake, senator from Arizona, released his latest volume of what he calls Waste Book.
I did see that.
Porky Man Go. He's so current.
Oh, is it really called
Porky Man Go? Oh, gosh. Anyway.
Have you played Pokemon Go yet?
No.
Either of you cats?
And I'm not going to. $5 billion in inappropriate spending by federal agencies and departments, $5 billion in a $4 trillion budget. But I guess in part explains why we have a $4 trillion budget. One example, $1.5 million in grants to the National Science Foundation to test what happens when fish use treadmills. Not kidding.
What?
That
is ridiculous.
This reminds me.
Was that the one about the fish going? How fast the fish go down the treadmill? Is that the
correct?
One, or?
Yes.
That was my favorite. They have a video of that, folks. It's wonderful to behold. It's just so nice to see your taxpayers are working. Boy, those fish, they can really scuttle down that treadmill.
Well, and the only way you know is if you get a grant from the National Science Foundation to test that hypothesis. So now we know that's very, very valuable. But here's the question.
And by the way, there's another one. Dan, did you see $500,000 for why Americans don't like to go to the dentist? And I have the answer to that. It does cost $500,000. The drill.
Right.
That's why we don't like going to the dentist.
You could have paid me $450,000 to tell you that. I could have undercut the grant recipient. But here's the question. So the Jeff Flake Waste Book, Tom Coburn used to do this when he was in the Senate from Oklahoma.
Yep, sure.
And so when
by the way, you guys know the original guy who did this was the senator from Wisconsin, blanking on his name. He did the Golden Fleece Award. Remember that? What was it? Proxmire.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
He was the originator of this. And, the fact is, I've been in politics and in policy for 5 years. This has been going on year after year,
sure.
And now nobody ever cuts it out. And this is, I think there's a serious point here that I want to get to, though. There is so much waste brought in the federal agencies. And I got to tell you, I've been to some of these transition meetings, and they're serious about not taking, a paper knife to these budgets, but taking a chainsaw and cutting and cutting and cutting. 10, 15% cuts in some of these agencies, in some cases 20%, in some cases just getting rid of the agencies we don't need. I have to tell you, there is so much waste. $160 billion, $160 billion, according to the federal government's own auditors, in fraudulent payments from Medicare, Social Security, food stamps, EITC, Medicaid, all these programs, and nobody for 25 years has done a damn thing about it.
Well, that's that's less than 5% of the federal budget, but it's still important, and that's the real question. And it seems to me one of the litmus tests.
It's not a lot of money.
Well, yeah, I understand, but I mean, in context, we have to put things in context. But it seems to me the general litmus test for Republican success and Trump's success is going to be not reducing the rate of spending, but are we really going to shrink the size and scope and expense of the federal government?
it's a tough thing to do. I mean, look, I'd love to see it, and I'm going to do everything I can as hopefully part of this team to make it happen. But, we're against a behemoth in Washington. I mean, every special interest group is out there, trying to protect their turf. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do, but I agree with you. Trump is going to be judged on whether he can actually slay this dragon. And, what was his metaphor at the end? Drain the swamp. This is what American people are so hungry for. I mean, I was on the campaign trail all around the country. I went to, I think, 49 states, everywhere but Illinois, because we gave up on Illinois. But, the point is, everywhere I went, I saw voters who had total contempt for Washington. And that was the overriding theme. Washington's getting rich at the expense of the rest of us. It's wasteful. It's bureaucratic. It's incompetent. And people know that. They're onto it. And Trump, if he's going to be a success, needs to do that, Dan. I can't agree with you more.
All right, so Donald Trump's first press conference in 6 months will be at 10 o'clock Central Time. You can hear it here on AM 560, The Answer. But is he going to explain?
That today?
Yeah,
Today.
It's today.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well,
I'll be tuning in. I didn't realize that.
Is your head under a rock? No, but here's the deal, because you're in his inner circle. How is he going to?
It's hard for him to upstage what our president did last night, But anyway, that'll be an interesting. Press
so,
conference.
how is Trump going to separate himself from his businesses? Because I'm sure that question is going to be coming up during the press conference.
I think he's just going to say what he said in the campaign. Look, the American people understand I have businesses, and I have, I'm a successful businessman. That's one of the reasons that people elected me to the presidency. They trust me. They trust my judgment. I'm going to put the country first. It's impossible probably for him to divest of every single business interest he has. But I think he just has to say, look, you knew this when you elected me, that I'm a billionaire businessman. I'm successful. I know how to build effective and productive companies, and I'm going to do that to the government. And I would just go right back at him. And look, why should it be that because you're a successful businessman, that you have business interests, that somehow you're disqualified from being president? That's how we get stuck with people like Barack Obama. How to run a lemonade stand, for goodness sakes.
Let me ask you a question about the forthcoming Republican tax plan. See if you can distill this a little bit. This is your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
The central idea put forward by Paul Ryan, which appears to have the support of Trump, is to turn the corporate income tax from a tax on the return to capital into a tax only on extraordinary profits by taxing corporate cash flows. Is that sensible tax policy in your estimation? Do you have concerns about that?
Wait, I missed I couldn't quite understand your point. That it's going to be taxing what?
Tax extraordinary profits, so which would be done by taxing corporate cash flows rather than from just taxing a return to capital. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I will say this: the big debate that you're going to see over the next couple of months and weeks, and there was a big meeting between the House Ways and Means Committee and the Trump team just 2 days ago. And this is this issue about whether we should have what's called a border adjustable business tax. And it's something I'm very much in favor of. Some of my conservative friends are against it. But basically what the House plan would do, which I think would be very smart, is we would start to tax our imports, things that are imported to the country, not things that are exported from the United States. And by the way, this is the way most other countries tax. And I think if we do that, you're going to have a much better trade situation in the United States, because it means if things are produced in Michigan or Illinois or Wisconsin and they're sent, to China or Mexico or India, other countries, it's not taxed when it's here. But when Mexico, China, India bring things into the United States and they're consumed here, we tax them here. It's a very smart way to tax. It's called a border adjustable tax. You're going to hear a lot more about this in the next couple of months.
Right.
It's going to be a very divisive issue because the retailers like Walmart hate this idea.
Right.
But I'd rather tax what we consume rather than what we produce.
But respond to this. Larry Summers wrote a piece about this, and just let's not attack the messenger. Respond to the example he presents. A retailer who imports goods from abroad for 60 cents, incurs 30 cents in labor and interest costs, and then earns a 5-cent margin with a 20% tax and no ability to deduct import or interest costs. The taxes will substantially exceed 100% of profits, even if there's some offset from like a stronger dollar. So what about that? I mean, that example, that retailer who imports.
I don't think he has his math right there. And maybe next week when we do the show, we can go into it a little bit more when we have a little bit more time. But the way this would work is that you no longer get to deduct from your expenses your imports. So if you're a big import company, if you're importing toys or
Right.
you're importing food or you're importing manufactured items, when it comes to the United States, it is like a tariff, but it's a GATT legal tariff. You're going to pay a tax on that. And when you produce something in Michigan, this is the problem. Let me give you one quick example. That company that wanted to move from Michigan, that car company, to Mexico, under the current tax laws, they were smart to do that because if the car is produced in the United States, in Mexico, they tax it at their border. It's taxed twice. If they move that car company to Mexico, because Mexico has this value-added tax model, if it's sold in the United States, it's not taxed in Mexico. Then when it comes to the United States, we don't tax it either. You can see why we have a huge trade deficit because of these stupid tax laws. And I think we can dramatically increase our exports and our jobs in this country if we move towards this tax system I'm talking about. And people, I had an article in the Washington Times on this called "The Case for the Border Adjustable Tax." I'd be very honored if you guys would post it so people can see what I'm talking about because it's a big, big economic issue. We're going to have a big debate in this country about it.
We'll post that, and I want to pick up the discussion next week when you join us about trade deficits and their importance or not so importance. But
no, trade deficits are not important.
Okay.
But we do need to increase our output in this country,
Yes.
and that's more jobs, and we can do that with a better tax system.
all right, he is Steve Moore, Chief Economist for the Heritage Foundation. Steve, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys.
And I tweeted out the fish on a treadmill, by the way. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.